I worked for Noah Chen for 5 years. And for 5 years I loved him. It wasn't until Isabelle Yin returned from overseas that I finally understood. I was merely her substitute. His white moonlight, the unforgettable phantom of his past, was back. And just like that, I knew any chance I might have desperately clung to had vanished. This is Isabelle Yin. She just got back from abroad, Noah said, gesturing to the woman beside him. The smile lighting up his face was one I hadn't seen directed at me in all the 5 years I'd known him, warm, genuine, unguarded. Looking at Isabelle, seeing the subtle but undeniable resemblance between her face and my own, a sharp, cold realization pierced through me. Suddenly made horrifying sense. Why he'd always treated me differently, kept me closer than other colleagues, yet always at arm's length emotionally. Isabelle was undeniably beautiful, radiating an effortless elegance. Standing next to Noah, they looked perfect together, a match sculpted by fate. But where did that leave me? What was I? I forced a tight, brittle smile, managing a polite greeting to Isabelle. Noah suddenly turned his attention back to me, though his eyes still lingered on Isabelle. "Annie," he said, his tone casual. "Belle is joining us for dinner later. I'll drive her home afterwards." My head snapped up, ready to agree, but Isabelle's bright, clear voice cut in first. "Oh, that sounds lovely. But won't it interfere with your work schedule, Noah?" Their subsequent exchange blurred into meaningless noise. A dull roaring filled my ears, and a heavy weakness seeped into my limbs, draining all my strength. Belle. That was the name he used for her. No wonder. My name is Annie Lin, but for 5 years, he had insisted on calling me Annie. Not out of affection, I now realized with sickening clarity, but because it sounded similar. He'd been looking at my face, calling my name, but seeing and speaking to another woman entirely. Noah noticed my sudden pallor, my stillness. "What's wrong, Annie?" he asked, a flicker of concern in his eyes. I shook my head quickly, squinting slightly, desperately trying to hide the light extinguishing, inch by painful inch behind my eyes. He seemed to grasp something then, his body tensing almost imperceptibly. Later, the descending elevator filled rapidly with the evening rush of departing employees. It grew crowded, bodies pressing close. Noah instinctively shielded Isabelle, who was leaning against the back wall, placing his hands on either side of her, creating a protective barrier. His bright, intense gaze was fixed solely on her face, her reflection mirrored in his eyes. The rest of the world, including me, had ceased to exist. I was pressed into a far corner, the stale, heavy air feeling thick and suffocating, mirroring the tightness in my chest. It seemed those 5 years of quiet devotion, of waiting patiently in the wings, had amounted to nothing more than a cruel joke. Felt like dust suddenly got in my eye. I sniffled quietly, blinking rapidly, staring blankly at his back as memories flooded me. Just 2 months after I started working for him, he began showing me unusual attention. Small kindnesses, casual inquiries about my well-being. Colleagues teased us relentlessly. Look at them. More like a couple than boss and subordinate. I'd blush furiously, stammering denials, while Noah would just sling a casual arm around my shoulder, grinning proudly, telling everyone what a capable and pretty assistant he had. Back then, I only noticed how captivating his eyes were. Later, there was the incident where I made a critical error on a client contract. When Noah found out, he immediately took full responsibility, shielding me completely. He endured a furious half-hour dressing down from the senior executives behind closed office doors. When he emerged, I rushed to apologize, my eyes red and swollen from crying. He simply ruffled my hair, hooked his thumbs in his pockets, leaning back with a characteristic lazy, almost roguish grin. "Come on, Annie," he'd said lightly. "Boss is treating you to dinner." His silhouette against the office lights seemed so tall, so dependable. I nodded mutely and hurried after him. That was the moment I truly started chasing his shadow, hoping one day he'd turn around and see me. I always knew there was someone else occupying his heart. I knew she had left him years ago, choosing a wealthier man, moving abroad. I had foolishly believed that if I just waited long enough, stayed by his side long enough, he might eventually forget her. That my quiet constancy could somehow erase her memory. Now it seemed my waiting was over, but not in the way I had hoped. Noah suddenly turned his head, his gaze scanning the crowded elevator. He spotted me crushed against the wall, his eyes widening slightly with surprise, perhaps a flicker of guilt. But the moment passed. He turned back immediately, adjusting his stance to shield Isabelle even more securely. I pressed my lips together, the forced smile finally crumbling, leaving behind a desolate emptiness. Perhaps the choice hadn't even been presented. Perhaps he had already made it long ago. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, I quickly excused myself, murmuring something about feeling unwell, declining the dinner invitation. As I turned away, I caught Isabelle glancing at me, a speculative, almost amused glint in her eyes. Saturday afternoon. Driven by a habit ingrained over 5 long years, I found myself standing outside Noah's apartment, automatically keying in the familiar entry code. The door clicked open. Stepping inside, the scent of him, his cologne, the faint aroma of coffee filled the air. Only here in this space could I allow myself the dangerous fantasy of being the woman of the house, cooking for him, caring for him. Suddenly, a low feminine moan drifted from the direction of the bedroom. My body froze. The small vase of flowers I brought slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the polished floor, scattering petals and shards of glass. The sound abruptly silenced the noise from the bedroom. A moment later, the bedroom door banged open, hitting the wall with a sharp crack. Noah stood framed in the doorway, his lips pressed into a thin, unnatural line. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice tight. My own lips trembled. Words jammed in my throat, burning, making my eyes sting. Why was I here? Habit. Sheer stupid habit. A bitter laugh echoed silently in my mind. He was brilliant at work, decisive and sharp, but utterly hopeless at managing his personal life. Since becoming his assistant, I had fallen into the routine of coming over every weekend to clean, tidy, stock his fridge. 5 years. The habit was etched into my bones. "Noah, darling, who is it?" Isabelle appeared behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, her hair artfully tousled, a few strands clinging damply to her forehead. The sight was a physical blow, a blade twisting in my chest. I could almost taste blood in my mouth. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words barely audible. I turned and fled. Downstairs on the pavement, my phone buzzed. A message from Noah. "Don't come over anymore. Isabelle doesn't like it." Ha, ha. For him, I had willingly broken my own pride, humbled myself completely, loving him from the dust beneath his feet. Once, he called late at night, needing something urgently. Despite crippling menstrual pain, I booked the first flight at dawn and flew. To him without hesitation. Another time, he casually mentioned craving salted duck from a famous shop across town. I stood in line for over an hour under the brutal summer sun, nearly collapsing from heatstroke, just to get it for him. He used to. But what did any of it matter now? All those years of devotion couldn't compete with the woman who had betrayed him, abandoned him. 5 years and 11 days. That's how long I had loved him. And now I felt utterly drained, empty. There was no strength left to love him anymore. It was time. Time to finally let go, to give myself a chance at survival. By the time I dragged myself home, dusk had settled, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple. My legs felt like lead weights as I climbed the stairs to my apartment building. Under the bright fluorescent lights of the stairwell landing, a man and a woman were locked in a quiet confrontation. The girl, young and pretty, gazed up at the man with wide, pleading eyes, her expression anxious. "Leo," she begged softly, "I've liked you for so long. Please just say yes. Be my boyfriend." The man shook his head slowly, his handsome face impassive, his eyes like still, deep water, utterly unmoved by her confession. "I'm sorry," he stated calmly, his voice flat. "I'm waiting for someone." Hearing his words, the girl's face drained of color, tears instantly filling her large eyes. The man simply watched her, impassive, his brow furrowing slightly with what looked like impatience. Seeing myself reflected in the girl's tear-filled eyes, a sudden surge of empathy, mixed with anger, rose within me. I impulsively spoke out, urging her not to waste her heart on someone who clearly didn't love her back. My unexpected interruption startled them both. The girl glared at me resentfully. "Mind your own business. Who asked you?" The man turned his head towards me, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw a flicker, a ripple of some emotion in those still eyes. A wave of self-mockery washed over me. Wasn't I just like her, throwing myself at Noah like a moth drawn to a destructive flame? What right did I have to preach to anyone? Feeling suddenly foolish and weary, I mumbled an apology and squeezed past them. As I brushed by, the man's sharply defined profile seemed to shift slightly. In the periphery, I thought I heard him mutter under his breath, Looks like she really forgot. Inside my apartment, I bypassed my parents' concerned questions, escaping directly to my bedroom. Curling up under the covers, I finally let the carefully constructed facade of strength crumble. Tears flowed freely, soaking the pillow. "Annie, honey, are you all right?" Mom's worried voice came through the closed door. "I'm fine, Mom," I called back, struggling to keep my voice even. "Just tired. Need some sleep." But I heard her heavy sigh clearly through the wood. In that moment, a profound wave of sorrow washed over me, threatening to drown me. "Okay, Annie Lynn," I told myself fiercely, scrubbing at my wet cheeks. "Cry it out. Then let him go." I took an extended leave from work, needing time and space to adjust to a life without Noah constantly in my orbit. Strangely though, during that time off, whether I was shopping downtown or just picking up groceries, I kept encountering him, the man from the stairwell, Leo Song. He'd always appear unexpectedly, offering a small, warm smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners, faint dimples appearing briefly, catching the sunlight. 3 days into my leave, Isabelle Yin called. She wanted to treat me to dinner, she said, to thank me for taking such good care of Noah over the years. The audacity. I made a polite excuse and refused. But then Noah himself called, using a fabricated work issue as a pretext, insisting I meet them. Sitting across from Noah and Isabelle, the steam rising from the bubbling hot pot between us creating a hazy barrier, I felt a million miles away. In just a few short days, their relationship seemed to have reignited completely. Joy radiated from them, an effortless intimacy obvious to anyone watching. Isabelle shot me a sideways glance, then deliberately picked up a piece of cilantro with her chopsticks and placed it gently into Noah's bowl. "Noah, darling," she cooed, her voice laced with solicitous concern. "You work such long hours, always staying up late. You need to eat more greens." Noah lowered his eyes, hesitating for a fraction of a second before picking up the cilantro and putting it in his mouth. He chewed slowly, his brow furrowing slightly with distaste, then swallowed. I looked down, tracing patterns on the tablecloth, a bitter taste filling my mouth. I knew Noah's preferences intimately. Cilantro was the one thing he absolutely detested, the smell alone sometimes enough to make him gag. Yet here he was eating it for her. In his eyes, Isabelle was everything. He would compromise anything for her, his preferences, his interests, even apparently me. "Annie," Noah began, his voice hesitant. I lifted my gaze slowly, waiting. He glanced briefly at Isabelle, then back at me. I've always just seen you as a colleague, Annie," he said, the words carefully chosen. "You understand that, right? Colleague." The word felt like a physical stab wound. Even though I had already decided to move on, hearing him say it aloud still sent jolts of pain through me. I lowered my eyes again, my mind drifting back. A year ago, after I'd brought him home drunk again, he'd been lying on the sofa, his brow creased with that familiar melancholy that always tugged at my heart. Overcome by a wave of tenderness, I'd reached out instinctively, smoothing the lines on his forehead. He had suddenly sat up, pulling me into his arms, his breath warm with alcohol. "Annie," he'd murmured against my hair, "I know how you feel about me. Just give me a little more time. Okay?" That small crumb of hope, that ambiguous promise, had fueled my devotion ever since, making even the thankless waiting seem worthwhile. Now I saw it for what it was. Just another line in the backup plan playbook. In Isabelle's presence, I was less than nothing. "Of course, boss. I understand," I replied, forcing a bright, casual smile, pretending to be absorbed in fishing a piece of potato out of the hot pot. Isabelle watched me intently, her expression shrewd, assessing. Then she smiled sweetly and suggested that since I wasn't getting any younger, perhaps she should help me find a boyfriend. She turned her gaze towards Noah. "Noah, darling, what do you think? Shall we?" Noah looked momentarily stunned, but after a brief pause, he nodded slowly in agreement. So, after serving my purpose as a substitute, they were now planning to casually pass me off to someone else? The old Annie would have been devastated, tears streaming down her face. But now? I simply glanced at them both, my expression utterly indifferent. "No, thank you. That won't be necessary." Just as Isabelle opened her mouth to persist, another voice cut through the restaurant noise, sharp and clear. "She's right. It won't be necessary. She already has me." The voice was firm, declarative. Leo Song strode towards our table. He leaned down, bending his tall frame close to my ear. His voice a low murmur meant only for me. Why let yourself be humiliated like this, Annie? Let me help you. Suddenly, something warm sparked within me, unexpected and bright. All this time, someone had been watching, silently noticing my carefully concealed pain, my forced smiles, the feeling of being truly seen. It was surprisingly wonderful. Impulsively, acting on an instinct I didn't fully understand, I stood up and linked my arm through his, standing against the light filtering. Through the restaurant window, I couldn't quite make out Noah's expression, but I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped his chopsticks. Out on the street, away from the restaurant lights, I gently withdrew my arm from Leo's. I stepped back slightly. Gratitude was one thing, but this man had been persistently appearing in my life. He likely had his own agenda. Thank you. I began, frowning slightly. But please stop following me. His clear, bright eyes instantly dimmed, a flicker of hurt crossing his face. You don't remember me, he stated flatly, a note of resignation in his voice. But surely you remember the scar? On your left palm. His sudden vulnerability, so different from the cool confidence he projected moments before, was disarming. Scar. Thought amused. My palm? I paused. Slowly, I turned my left hand over, examining my palm. There it was, faint now, just a thin white line, but definitely there. Memories, dusty and long forgotten, began to surface, fragments coalescing into a vivid picture from my adolescence. Junior high. The boy who sat in front of me was named Leo Song. He was chubby back then, quiet, often bullied by the other kids. He spent most breaks alone, staring silently out the classroom window or at the blackboard after everyone else had left. I, on the other hand, was boisterous, outgoing, maybe a little rough around the edges. We clashed somehow, I don't even remember why, and ended up in a physical fight. Of course, his size gave him the advantage. One casual shove sent me stumbling backwards. My hand scraped against a protruding metal screw on the edge of a desk. The gash was deep. That's how I got the scar. Later, the school called our parents. His didn't come. That's when I learned he was an orphan, living with relatives. Maybe feeling sorry for him, sensing his loneliness, I started talking to him. I became his only friend. And he became my shadow, my loyal little tail, constantly tagging along wherever I went. After junior high graduation, Leo moved away with his uncle to Shanghai. We lost touch completely. Now, standing on the busy street, I circled the tall, handsome man before me, scrutinizing his lean build, his well-proportioned features. You're Leo? I asked incredulously. Chubby Leo? A muscle twitched in his jaw. He puffed out his chest slightly defensively. I'm not chubby anymore. Curiosity overriding propriety, I reached out and poked his abdomen. Solid muscle met my finger, surprisingly firm. Realizing the intimacy of the gesture, I quickly snatched my hand back, my ears burning. He looked down at my withdrawn hand, his smile faltering slightly. Under the yellow glow of the streetlight, his straight shoulders seemed to slump just a little. Over the next week, Leo skillfully leveraged the convenience of living in the same apartment building, and the emotional connection of our shared childhood, and his multiple visits to my parents' home back then, to completely win over my parents. Now he sat across from my father, deeply engrossed in a game of chess, a relaxed smile playing on his lips, looking utterly at home. My mother kept popping her head out of the kitchen, her gaze darting between Leo and me, muttering something under her breath. A sense of peace settled over me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The atmosphere in our home felt lighter, happier than it had been in years. Because yes, my love for Noah had been an open secret. My parents hadn't forbidden it, but they deeply disapproved of the way I'd humbled myself, sacrificed my dignity for him. Whenever I was home, Mom would inevitably launch into her worried lectures. Honestly, Annie, we fed you the same rice as everyone else. How did we raise such a foolish girl? Dad would usually just sigh, pretend to read the newspaper, often upside down. But I could see the worry, the heartache for me reflected in his eyes behind his reading glasses. Suddenly, thinking of Noah now, the sharp pain was gone, replaced by nothing. A dull indifference. I smiled faintly, a genuine smile this time, getting up to place a bowl of fruit beside the chessboard, then settled down to watch them play. Haha, checkmate. You lost, Leo, Dad announced triumphantly, dropping his final chess piece into the box, grinning like a child. Leo gracefully conceded defeat, offering Dad a flattering compliment on his strategy. Then he turned his head, looking directly at me, his expression mock serious, as if I were somehow responsible for his loss. "Hey," I muttered defensively. "Don't blame me for your own bad playing." He just reached over and gently ruffled my hair, his eyes softening with unmistakable affection. At dinner, Mom loaded Leo's bowl with his favorite braised ribs, then shot Dad a meaningful glance. Dad cleared his throat. "Annie, since you're on leave now, you should take Leo out more often. Show him around. He just moved back from Shanghai, probably doesn't know the city well anymore." Before I could respond, Leo eagerly agreed. "Okay." His smile held a definite hint of triumphant scheming. It was less me showing Leo around, and more Leo dragging me on a nostalgic tour of all the places we used to frequent as kids. Finally, he stopped in a narrow, familiar alleyway, turning to face me, his eyes full of quiet anticipation. "Do you remember," he asked softly, "what I said to you here the day I left?" I met his gaze, and suddenly, the hazy fragments of memory clicked into place. The image sharpened, young Leo, chubby Leo, standing nervously in this exact spot under the harsh summer sun, his adolescent face earnest and serious. "Annie," he'd said, his voice cracking slightly, if we meet again someday and you don't have a boyfriend then, can I pursue you?" "Annie, can I pursue you?" Leo's voice, deeper now, pulled me from the memory. He had stepped closer, his eyes, once like still pools, now held a burning intensity. My breath caught. My heart, long dormant, gave a sudden tentative leap. Annie, was that nickname truly mine? Not borrowed, not a substitute's label? I smiled, a slow, watery smile. Tears welled up, tracing paths down my cheeks. "But Leo," I whispered, the confession raw, vulnerable, "I loved Noah for 5 years. My heart, it's scarred, broken. I don't know how to love anymore." Leo's body went rigid, the warmth draining from his face, even his dimples seeming to hold pain. He gently pulled me into his arms, his own voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," he murmured against my hair. "I came back 5 years too late." He smoothed the stray hairs from my forehead, his touch infinitely tender. "You loved someone else for 5 years," he whispered. "Now let me be the one to cherish you." I looked up at him, into those earnest, loving eyes. In that instant, something unexpected, something akin to hope, flickered within me, tentative but real. It was a feeling I had never ever experienced with Noah. "Okay," I whispered back. He looked startled, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Okay," I repeated, a little stronger this time. "You can pursue me. But whether you succeed, well, that depends on your skills." A slow, brilliant grin spread across his face, lighting up his features. He paused for a moment, thinking, then grabbed my hand, pulling me out of the alleyway, leading me on an impromptu whirlwind tour of high-end luxury boutiques. Seeing my bewildered, slightly disapproving expression, he suddenly looked flustered, uncertain. A genuine laugh escaped me. "Leo Song, have you actually never courted a girl before?" He flushed slightly, avoiding my eyes, mumbling something about being hungry and needing dinner, despite the fact we'd eaten just 2 hours earlier. After spending a month exploring the city with Leo, I finally returned to work. To avoid awkwardness, I requested a transfer out of Noah's direct department. My close colleagues teased me gently, saying the moth had finally stopped flying into the flame, that I'd finally seen sense after hitting my head against the south wall for 5 years. One of them leaned in conspiratorially, whispering that Noah had been incredibly irritable and short-tempered lately. I just smiled faintly, offering no comment. The man whose slightest mood fluctuation once dictated my own happiness now barely registered on my emotional radar. If there was anything left, it was perhaps a faint melancholy, the lingering ghost of a 5-year investment that yielded no return. I encountered Noah a few times in the office corridors. He looked shadowed, haunted. His usually immaculate suit seemed slightly rumpled, his hair less perfectly styled. I offered polite, professional greetings, maintaining a careful distance, respectful, acknowledging our past association, but firmly impersonal. It felt like the right balance for our complicated history. After all, despite the heartbreak, he had taught me a great deal professionally during those 5 years, enabling me to establish myself in my field. For that, at least, I owed him a measure of gratitude. He usually just stared back, taking a moment to process my greeting before offering a stiff, almost imperceptible nod. Once as I walked past, I saw him start to raise his hand as if to stop me, but then let it fall back to his side, his expression turning even gloomier. Years of working closely with him allowed me to recognize the signs. Guilt. He felt guilty. I wanted to tell him not to. That my choices, my pursuit were my own. But I just quickened my pace, walking away. Further entanglement would only exhaust us both. Late one afternoon, the sky, previously ablaze with sunset colors, suddenly opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour. Leaving the office building, I unexpectedly ran into Noah again, leaning against the wall near the entrance, sheltering from the rain, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He stared out at the downpour, seemingly lost in thought, oblivious to the fine mist dampening his suit. Seeing me, he quickly flicked the cigarette butt into the rain-slick street, joining a small collection already scattered in the gutter near his feet. "You probably didn't bring an umbrella," he stated, his voice slightly hoarse. "Let me drive you home." "No, thank you," I replied politely, glancing at the pile of discarded cigarettes. Clearly, he'd been standing there for a while. It wasn't intentional avoidance. Leo had already texted saying he was on his way. "The rain looks like it's set in for a while," he persisted, taking a step towards me. "Let me give you a ride." I met his gaze calmly, offering a small smile. "Really, boss, it's fine. Someone's coming to pick me up." Oh, okay." He stopped, looking slightly flustered. He fumbled for another cigarette, taking several attempts to light it in the damp air. He took a long drag, exhaled slowly, lips parting as if to say something more, but then clamped them shut, his gaze suddenly fixing on something behind me. I turned. Through the sheets of rain, I saw Leo's tall figure approaching rapidly, holding a large, dark umbrella, splashing through the puddles. Reaching my side, Leo shot Noah a brief, coolly hostile glance, then shrugged off his own jacket, draping it gently around my shoulders. "Sorry," he murmured, his eyes warm with affection as he looked down at me. "Did I keep you waiting long?" I smiled up at him, brushing a stray raindrop from his hair. Perfect timing. And it was. His arrival had perfectly diffused the lingering awkwardness with Noah. As Leo steered me towards his car under the umbrella, I glanced back one last time. Noah stood frozen where we'd left him, still smoking, letting the ash fall unheeded onto his expensive suit, looking utterly desolate, swallowed by the rain and shadows. The car splashed through the flooded streets. I studied Leo's profile silently. Usually he was a chatterbox around me, but now he was strangely quiet, his jaw tight. I assumed he was preoccupied and decided not to disturb him. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, he broke it, his voice tight, strained. "You still can't forget him, can you?" I blinked, surprised, then looked at his slumped posture, his dejected expression. A small smile touched my lips. Was Leo Song jealous? "Aren't you pursuing me anymore?" I asked, keeping my tone light, teasing. He clenched his jaw. "I am." "Well then," I continued playfully, "I'm currently single, completely available. Maybe if you try a little harder, you might just succeed." He glanced over, catching the hint of encouragement in my voice. A spark ignited in his deep-set eyes. He abruptly turned the car down a side street, taking a known shortcut towards home. After parking, he practically dragged me towards his apartment. The moment the door closed behind us, before I could even process what was happening, he pinned me against the wall, one hand braced beside my head, the classic Cabotin move. He leaned close, his handsome face inches from mine, his eyes blazing with possessive intensity. My heart hammered against my ribs, faster than ever before. "Where?" I managed to ask, my voice slightly breathless. "Did you learn such an outdated seduction technique?" "It's not working," he asked, his confidence faltering instantly. He dropped his hand, stepping back, looking suddenly crestfallen. It wasn't that it wasn't working. It was just that he couldn't see the blush creeping up my neck, hidden by my hair, or feel the frantic pulse beneath my skin. After the rain stopped, Leo insisted on taking me out again: dinner, shopping, a movie. He meticulously planned all the typical date activities, but his execution was endearingly awkward. At dinner, he sat formally across from me. While shopping, he maintained a noticeable gap between us, large enough to drive a small car through. And the movie? He took me to see a documentary. Leaving the theater, I couldn't help muttering under my breath. Who takes a girl to see a documentary on a date these days? What did you say? Leo asked, leaning closer. Nothing, I said quickly, holding up the bubble tea he'd bought me. Just that this tea tastes weird. He frowned, took the cup from my hand, took a long sip through the straw, then licked his lips thoughtfully. Tastes fine to me. Perfect, actually. I stared pointedly at the lipstick mark my mouth had left on the straw. Perfect. He looked back at me, completely oblivious. Leo, I sighed, shaking my head. Maybe I should start calling you Leo the Oblivious instead? Am I oblivious? He asked earnestly. Yes. Back home, removing my makeup, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The corners of my lips were tilted upwards in a faint, unconscious smile. Just then my phone, forgotten in my bag, began to ring. Seeing Noah's name flash on the screen, the smile vanished. It was Noah. His voice sounded rough, asking if I wanted to grab a late-night bite, adding he had something he wanted to tell me. The old Annie would have dropped everything, run to him even if it were raining knives. But now, I looked out at the dark, quiet street below my window. If you have something to say, Noah, just say it over the phone. He sighed heavily on the other end. After a long pause, he just murmured something about catching up another time and hung up. Once you let go, I whispered to my reflection, there's no going back. Over the next few weeks, my mother kept subtly probing, trying to gauge the status of my relationship with Leo, her tone clearly indicating she was rooting for him. As for the status, we were still basically treading water. After the Noah fiasco, I'd built formidable walls around my heart. Even though I felt a definite attraction to Leo, a growing fondness, I couldn't bring myself to take that final vulnerable step. Something still felt missing. Life fell into a pattern punctuated by Leo's often endearingly clumsy attempts at romance. Noah continued to occasionally reach out, suggesting casual catch-ups, but I consistently declined, unwilling to get drawn back into his orbit. One evening, Leo showed up at my door with a mischievous grin, announcing mysteriously that we were going to the riverbank to watch the stars. I glanced skeptically up at the starless, moonless night sky. We arrived at the deserted riverbank, where a man Leo introduced as a friend was already waiting. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, Leo checked his watch and excused himself, saying he needed to make a quick phone call. The moment Leo walked away, his friend sighed dramatically. Sister-in-law, he began conspiratorially. My buddy Leo might be a genius in business, but when comes to romance, he's clueless. Total blank slate. Never seriously dated anyone, despite getting tons of confessions since college. Do you know why? I blinked, surprised by the sudden confidence. Before I could respond, he continued. Because since junior high, he's been trapped in a prison of his own longing, waiting 12 years just for the chance to meet you again. Suddenly, I remembered Leo's words in the stairwell, rejecting that girl, saying he was waiting for someone. I dismissed it as a polite excuse at the time. 12 years. How had he endured it? It must have been agonizingly lonely. A sharp pang of sympathy, mingled with something warmer, pierced through me. In that instant I understood. What was missing between us? It wasn't chemistry, it wasn't affection. It was the final piece needed to dismantle my defenses. Profound, undeniable emotional connection. Leo's friend smiled knowingly, then pulled out a walkie-talkie. Okay, he spoke into it. Showtime. A deafening boom echoed across the water as fireworks exploded spectacularly overhead, showering the sky with glittering sparks. Simultaneously, rows of fluorescent lights along the riverbank flickered on, bathing the area in bright light. Flower petals seemed to rain down from nowhere. Through the dazzling display, Leo walked slowly towards me, holding a huge bouquet of vibrant tulips, his handsome face illuminated by the lights, glowing with affection. Annie, he said softly, stopping before me. Will you be my girlfriend? Tears blurred my vision. Why? I whispered, my voice thick. Why are you so good to me? A shadow of past pain crossed his face. Back then, he explained quietly, after my parents died, my world went dark. You were the first person who showed me kindness, who made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. You showed me what light felt like. He paused, his gaze intense. So, Annie Lynn, he asked again, his voice filled with hopeful vulnerability. Will you be my girlfriend? He pulled me gently into his arms. And then I heard myself whisper, yes. I also heard him exhale raggedly, holding me tighter. Annie, he murmured against my hair, his voice thick with emotion. I finally found you again. In that moment, surrounded by light and flowers, held securely in his arms, I knew. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Leaning against him, I thought briefly of the 5 years I'd spent chasing Noah, pouring my heart out for someone who offered nothing in return. How foolish I had been. The day after I officially became Leo's girlfriend, he showed up at my parents' apartment looking like a prospective son-in-law ready for inspection, laden with so many shopping bags they overflowed the small coffee table. Clearly, he'd been planning this, choosing gifts meticulously tailored to my parents' tastes. Trying to propose already? I teased him. His eyes lit up, taking me seriously. Good idea. I'll start preparing right away. Seeing he wasn't joking, I quickly stopped him. Proposing on day 2? Definitely needed to stick with the Leo the Oblivious nickname. That day my parents were happier than I'd seen them in years. Not because of the gifts, but because I had finally escaped the relationship that had caused them so much worry. Leo seemed to have endless free time, constantly sticking close to me. After working nonstop in Shanghai for so many years, he claimed, I deserve a long vacation. But I knew the truth. Knew he spent hours every night on remote calls, managing his business from afar, then woke up early every morning just to drive me to work. I urged him to rest, but he waved off my concerns. Until the morning I encountered Noah again, and finally understood Leo's true objective. It was a biting winter morning, the wind sharp and cold. Leo walked me to my office building entrance, shielding me protectively. Seeing the fatigue etched around his eyes, I urged him again to go home and rest, telling him not to bother picking me up after work. He nodded absently, his gaze scanning the surroundings restlessly. Suddenly, his eyes lit up with a familiar glint. He leaned down swiftly and kissed me, a possessive, lingering kiss right there on the public sidewalk. Then he pulled back slightly, raising his head proudly, a smug little smirk on his face. Confused, I followed his triumphant gaze. Standing near the entrance by the frozen flower beds was Noah. His face was pale, tight with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. So that's why Leo had been acting like a stealthy spy every time he dropped me off or picked me up. He was waiting for an opportunity to demonstrate his ownership directly to Noah. Leo the Oblivious had a surprisingly cunning territorial streak. All morning, the memory of Leo's public kiss made my cheeks flush unexpectedly. Colleagues shot me curious glances, asking why I seemed so distracted. Mumbled vague excuses, feeling flustered. Gradually, I realized Leo had firmly occupied a significant space in my heart, while Noah's shadow had faded almost completely. It wasn't that my love for Noah hadn't been deep. It was that 5 years of unrequited longing, of emotional exhaustion, had slowly eroded it away. Leo's arrival, carrying the weight of 12 years of unwavering devotion, had simply provided the final decisive push I needed to truly let go. Annie, a colleague nudged me, interrupting my thoughts, her expression brimming with gossip. Did you hear? Noah and his white moonlight broke up. Apparently, she found herself a richer sugar daddy and dumped Noah flat. A strange mix of emotions swirled within me. The backup plan failed again? Perhaps Isabelle had never intended to stay with Noah, merely using him as a temporary fallback after her other prospects fizzled out. Fate certainly had a twisted sense of humor. Noah used me as Isabelle's substitute, only to be treated as someone else's backup plan by Isabelle herself. The thought caused only a faint ripple of sympathy, now quickly fading. Noah's recent downturn demeanor suddenly made more sense. It was a shame, really. The confident, capable man I once admired shouldn't let himself be destroyed by a woman like that. My colleague, after venting her disdain for Isabelle, calling her a high-maintenance gold digger, turned back to her work. I smiled faintly to myself. During my lunch break, I ran into Noah again near the coffee machine. He looked terrible. His tie was loose, his hair messy, radiating an aura of sheer exhaustion and defeat. For a disorienting moment, he looked exactly like he had the very first day I met him. Back then I was a naive new recruit. He'd been slouched on the office sofa, smoking, bathed in sunlight. Unshaven but devastatingly handsome, shrouded in that same heart-wrenching melancholy. Seeing me then, he had straightened up slightly, a strange light flickering in his deep eyes. Want to work for me? He'd asked abruptly. I'll teach you how to handle clients. Lost in the smoky haze and his captivating presence, I had simply nodded, whispering, okay. After that, I became his shadow, sharing his triumphs, soothing his sorrows, witnessing him slowly emerge from the darkness Isabelle had left him in. Now everything had come full circle. Except I was no longer the same naive girl willing to sacrifice everything for him. "Can we talk?" Noah asked, his voice low, defeated. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The rooftop wind was strong, whipping strands of hair across my face. I tucked them behind my ear, waiting for Noah to speak. "Anne," he began, using the old diminutive. My head snapped up, my gaze sharp, pinning him. That name felt like grit lodged under my eyelid. Irritating, painful every time it surfaced. Other hurts I could perhaps forgive. Eventually. But I despised being called by a name that belonged to another woman. A name that symbolized my substitute status. My heart wasn't large enough, not forgiving enough for that. Noah flinched, immediately correcting himself. "Annie." He fell silent again. "If there's nothing important, I should get back to work," I said finally, breaking the tense silence. He stepped closer, the lines of exhaustion on his face seeming deeper now. "Are you really with him now?" "With Song." Thinking of Leo, a genuine warmth spread through me, softening my expression. "Yes. We're together." "I regret it," Noah whispered, pain flashing in his eyes. "I regret realizing too late that my feelings for Isabelle weren't love, just obsession. Lingering attachment from the past." His gaze fixed on my face, desperate. "I shouldn't have. I didn't realize I'd fallen for you, Annie. Not until it was too late." He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling slightly. "Annie, come back to me." This confession, the words I had yearned to hear for 5 long years, they landed now with startlingly little impact. My heart remained calm, unmoved. Perhaps it was true. A woman whose heart has truly died can become colder, more detached than any man. I shook my head slowly. "Noah," I said gently but firmly, "between us, it can only ever be professional. Boss and subordinate." His eyes seemed to hollow out, losing their remaining light. He started muttering something under his breath. The wind snatched the words away, but it didn't matter anymore. When Leo picked me up from work that evening, his eyes were still darting around suspiciously. Now I knew exactly what he was looking for. I playfully scolded him, telling him to behave himself, reminding him we were in public. He grinned sheepishly, finally relaxing. This man, since we started dating officially, seemed to have unlocked a hidden talent for romance, constantly surprising me with small gestures, sweet words whispered against my skin when he hugged me from behind, resting his chin in the curve of my neck. Later, I discovered a book tucked away in his study titled 100 Ways to Make Your Girlfriend Happy. So it wasn't innate talent but dedicated effort. He wasn't just naturally romantic. He was actively learning how to be the boyfriend I deserved. Leo sometimes cooked for me too, preparing elaborate meals featuring all my favorite dishes, then watching eagerly as I tasted each one, his expression anxious for approval. One evening at dinner, he seemed unusually subdued. I asked him what was wrong. I have to go back to Shanghai for a while," he admitted reluctantly. "Some business issues I need to handle in person." He paused. "It might take quite some time." My hand tightened around my chopsticks. After a long moment, I managed a quiet, "Okay. Annie," he began, then stopped, biting his lip, clearly hesitant. "Could you maybe?" "What is it?" "Oh, nothing. Let's just eat." I knew what he wanted to ask. If I would come with him. But I had my career here, my parents, and our relationship, though progressing, was still relatively new. Felt too soon for such a big step. The impulsive girl who would drop everything for love was gone. The next day at the airport, he held me incredibly tight, as if trying to fuse our bodies together. I teased him, asking why he was acting like this was a final goodbye, not just a temporary separation. But after his plane took off, soaring into the clouds, a sharp pang of loneliness hit me. I already missed him. 8 days after Leo left, a major problem arose with a key client account in Guangzhou, one that Noah and I had originally secured together. The company dispatched us both, along with 2 other colleagues, to handle the crisis. At least having others present eased the potential awkwardness. I mentioned the business trip during my nightly call with Leo. Hearing that Noah and I would be traveling together, the line went completely silent. I could hear his soft, shallow breathing, the unspoken tension crackling between us. Finally, after a long pause, he just said, "Okay." Despite his neutral tone, I sensed his underlying anxiety. I didn't press it, just murmured softly, "Get some rest, Leo. I'll be waiting for you when you get back." The next morning on the flight to Guangzhou, Noah somehow managed to switch seats with my colleague, ending up beside me. He looked polished, sharper, more put together than he had recently, clearly having made an effort. He offered me a cup of black coffee. "I know you like black coffee," he said casually. "I got an extra one." For a moment I hesitated, then pointed to the thermos of sweet tea I held. "Actually," I replied gently, "I've switched to sweet drinks lately." His hand tightened slightly around the coffee cup. He lowered his gaze. "Even your tastes have changed?" he murmured almost to himself. "No," I thought. Silently. "I never actually liked black coffee. I only forced myself to drink it back then because you liked it." I just offered a small non-committal smile. Upon arrival, we went straight into intense negotiations with the client. After several grueling days, we managed to salvage the deal. That evening, after the celebratory dinner, Noah intercepted me near the hotel elevator. He suggested we go for a walk. His attempts at reconciliation throughout the trip, the attentiveness, the lingering glances hadn't gone unnoticed. But a shattered vase, no matter how carefully glued back together, is never truly whole again. I politely declined, claiming fatigue, wanting only to retreat to my room. He sensed the finality in my refusal, the cool distance I maintained. His eyes, already slightly bloodshot from alcohol and stress, grew redder, a flicker of his old temper surfacing. As I turned away, he grabbed my wrist, his voice low, desperate. "Annie, please. Let me make it up to you. Let me compensate you for." Looking down at the red marks his fingers were leaving on my skin, I interrupted him calmly. "Noah," I said quietly, meeting his eyes, "don't make me lose respect for you completely." "Annie." His breathing grew heavier. He suddenly pulled me roughly into his arms. "I don't believe it." He rasped against my hair. 5 years. You can't just erase 5 years of feelings like that." I struggled against his hold, trying to push him away, but he held fast. Suddenly my body went rigid. Over his shoulder, standing under the swaying shadows of a nearby tree, a familiar figure came into view. Leo. His face was set, cold as stone. "Noah, let go of me. Now." The command was icy, barely whispered but laced with steel. He froze instantly at my tone, his arms dropping away, leaving me free. He stepped back, a broken, desolate smile twisting his lips. "I'm sorry," he whispered. At that moment I felt nothing for him, not even anger. Just pity. As Leo walked purposefully towards us, I started to explain. "Leo, He cut me off, placing a gentle finger against my lips. "You don't need to explain, Annie. I trust you." He shot Noah a single dismissive glance, then wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders. "Annie," he murmured, his voice warm against my ear. "Promises are cheap. So I decided to show you my love with actions instead." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a delicate necklace. The pendant was a beautifully crafted candy shape, made from a single flawless ruby. He fastened it gently around my neck. "I know asking you to move to Shanghai was a difficult choice," he continued softly. "So I moved my company's main operations here. Now we never have to be apart again." I finally understood his earlier hesitation, his unspoken request. He knew how torn I would be. Tears welled up again, blurring his handsome face. Something warm and vital took root in my chest, unfurling like a new leaf. My eyes stung, my ears felt hot. "Okay," I whispered, leaning into his embrace. "Never apart again." Under the harsh glare of the hotel entrance lights, Noah's figure seemed to shrink, diminished. His usually straight spine sagged. "I pushed her away," he murmured, so low it was almost inaudible, like talking to himself. "I pushed her away myself." Leo turned his head slowly, looking back at Noah, a faint, triumphant smile touching his lips. "Thank you for that," he said. Clearly, his voice carrying easily in the quiet night air. "Her future is my concern now. You don't need to worry about it anymore." The words were undeniably sharp, perhaps even cruel. But what could I say? My Leo, it turned out, was fiercely protective. And maybe just a little bit possessive too. End.